Amen. Morning, church. How are you this morning? I hope your fast went well this week. I avoided Starbucks all week. Unfortunately, whenever I passed, our challenge last week was to avoid something you kind of like doing, and every time you do, pray for the church, thank God that you're wanted. And there's like 900 Starbucks in Turlock. So every time I drove by one, it was like little prayers all day long. And then I had to make like 6 appointments this week, and I started out saying, I'll meet you at somewhere else, at church or something. It was just a really interesting week, as every time God did this, he reminded me to pray for our church. He reminded me that I'm a wanted individual. It was kind of a fun week. So I thank all of you that tried it this week. Some people only made it to Tuesday, and that's okay. You did really well. Some people tried to give up chocolate, which is ridiculous. I said just a brand of chocolate, not all of it. That's crazy. Give up Ghirardelli or something, right? So for all of you that attempted it and succeeded, or maybe just made it a few days, thanks for your prayers this week. It was kind of a fun week to be a little bit holy, to thank God for us being wanted. A reminder, November 10th, Lee will be here. Lee Towns will be here to preach to us. That's in about a month, really, isn't it? He'll be preaching that day, and we'll be voting that same day. We'll be doing one service, the whole church family together, because we're a generational church, aren't we? And all the generations should be in a room together as we make this kind of important decision together and listen to God's will. So on November 10th, we will have a 10 a.m. service, and we will go all the way through a church service and voting all in that same morning. So be prepared for that. Mark your calendars, all those good things. We're looking forward to what God's going to do as we move forward to this vote of affirmation for Lee Towns in our church. Mark your calendars, November 10th. November 10th. I will say it again, November 10th. Because somebody said, it's today, right? And I'm like, November 10th. Okay, so we want to make sure everybody's clear and nobody gets excited early and starts voting early. That would be awkward, okay? We don't want to do that. Sometimes I worry for my dog. I do. I think I'm giving him a complex. I have this English Mastiff. Of course I do. And he's small for an English Mastiff. Most English Mastiffs, his dad was almost 200 pounds, and his shoulders came up to here on me. He was one of those dogs that gave you a flight impulse, so you wanted to run away when you saw him. Mine was the runt. He's only 120 pounds, very disappointing, and I tell him so. But I tell him with a smile, because you can do this with dogs, can't you? You're like, you're really disappointing. Did you know that? And I like to tell him how disappointing he is to me in a nice voice. But here's what I really do. My dog is like the brunt of my angry impulses. Did anybody do this to your pets? Am I the only one? You're all liars. You do too. Okay. My dog becomes like this center for me. When I have a bad day or something, I kind of take it out on my dog. Because what I do, I tend to get mad all day long. Little anger pops up, and I just shove it back down. Oh, get back down there. Because it's not socially acceptable to scream at other adults, is it? No, it's not, okay? So I get angry maybe about some little slight. Maybe a waitress treated me badly, or maybe somebody made fun of me, or something happened, and I interpreted something badly, and I get mad about it, and I just, get back down there, and I shove it back down. It's similar to what you do when you're putting trash in the trash can, and you know it's full, but you shove it down in the hopes that somebody else will fill it up and empty it so you don't have to. Same thing. Same thing what my anger does, okay? So I shove the anger down, I get it in there really tight, but unfortunately, every once in a while, something pops out. And it's usually to my dog. Now, I don't get crazy and beat him or anything, but my dog's favorite pastime, this huge dog, is to stand in front of me, walk in front of me, and just stop and turn, and hoping that I will trip over him, because that's good attention, isn't it? So he has this little coy trick. I think he's trying to kill me. Maybe he knows I'm making fun of him. And so he does this to me, and I go, what are you doing? Why do you always walk in front of me? And I get mad, and I realize what's happening is all this anger I've shoved down that I don't let out anywhere else is coming out into my poor dog, and he gets sad, and he walks off in the corner, and I feel bad, and we make up, and he can sit in my lap, because he's a lap dog to me, okay? For all of you, he weighs the same as you, but to me, he's just a teeny little lap dog. So this is what I do. I shove my anger down, and then sometimes the anger kind of leaks out, and it just happens on my dog most of the time. It just pops out, and my dog tends to take the brunt of kind of my angry outbursts. You ever have your anger kind of leak out a little bit? Like you spend so much time and you shove it in, the little irritations, and you get them in there really good, and then maybe there's that person that you take your anger out on. Who gets the brunt of yours? Maybe family members, kids. That little moment, right, where you save it up and you come home and maybe you're frustrated. And again, nothing abusive, nothing crazy, but it's like, why is this happening? And you kind of let it out. Those things you've been keeping in all day long. I see lots of nudging. He's talking about you. okay? And that's okay. That's okay because you're nudging each other, and that's what's important. This is what we do. And now I have concern that when we take and shove anger down over and over, that under our surface emotions is just anger. I have concerns that as humans, if all we do is take the anger and shove it down, and we keep a surface of niceness, that what's under there is anger and bitterness, and that keeps getting let out. And we're keeping this facade going in the hopes that we can contain this deep core of anger or bitterness, because that's all we've shoved down into our life. I was thinking about that everything and everyone that makes me irritated and slighted me or makes me look stupid. And when I'm alone, that's what comes up in my head. When I'm sitting with God sometimes, it's ruminating and remembering the day. I'm like, oh, this person treated me this way, or this person did this to me, or this person treated me this way, and that person cut me off in traffic, and that red light didn't change fast enough, and that McDonald's employee didn't smile long enough, and that person didn't say thank you for the tip. And it's all the little things, I just shove them in, and when I'm alone with God, they tend to boil up. And that's what concerns me. When I'm alone with God, I see my inner self, and there's a lot of anger down there. And the problem is, I don't know what to do about this ocean of anger underneath my surface. I don't know what to do about it. So this week, I spent a lot of time looking at anger. I spent a lot of time, and I hope that this morning we can look at Jesus and anger and look at what's underneath the surface and begin to deal with that deep, maybe inner self that is angry down there somewhere for many of us. Now, we are continuing our series about Jesus through the eyes of Mark, the Gospel of Mark. We have based this series on a quote by a man named N.T. Wright. And N.T. Wright is probably the most influential theologian alive today. And he said, Jesus was and is much, much more than people imagine. Jesus was and is much, much more than people imagine. Now, one might think to deal with anger that we're going to look at Jesus and how patient he always was. And then in looking at Jesus and watching how patient he was with all these different people, that we can emulate that patience, and we're going to figure this out. There, however, is a very, very small problem. You and I tend to build a Jesus up that we built in our minds, this kind Jesus on the flannel board with lambs underneath and children on his lap. And that's the Jesus always smiling, and that's the Jesus we built maybe from our childhood up. The process of this talk series, much, much more, is to take the real Jesus and replace our fantasy Jesus with the real Jesus and begin to bring him in the depth of who he was. Because here's the thing, Mark especially doesn't give us a particularly patient Jesus. He gives us kind of an angry Jesus. Most of the time when he writes about Jesus, more than any other gospel, Jesus kind of loses his temper a little bit. Now we know Jesus never sinned. So when he gets angry, he's getting angry, but he seems to kind of snap on people every once in a while. He seems to get angry kind of easy sometimes. And I think there's more to looking at Jesus' anger and learning about our own than there is at looking at his patience. There's more looking at what made him lose his temper a little bit, what made these flashes of anger come up to the Pharisees and his family and to his disciples. What made them happen? Now, I have issues with pastors. Jesus' anger makes me really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. I think if Jesus' anger was the kind where he got angry and the earth shook and the Pharisees were diving for cover, I could take that kind of anger. Good for him. Oh, that rage of God, right? But Jesus' anger was kind of like snappy. It was. He'd kind of snap at people. Hey, why are you let those kids come here? What are you doing? And he was like me, kind of. And that makes me wonderfully uncomfortable. Now, some of my pastor friends avoid the uncomfortable passages of the Bible. I love them because they've changed the foundation of how I understand Jesus. I don't get to build my old Jesus anymore. I get to see him for who he was. Now, that being said, I had this kind of deep hope when it came to my anger, that understanding Jesus' anger would help me understand how to turn mine around and change my inner angry self to something different. Now, the first thing I did is I looked at Jesus' anger. I asked 3 questions from the text in Mark this week as I studied and prayed through what was happening. First question I asked was, what made Jesus angry? What made Jesus angry in the Bible? Mark 3 says this, 3:1-6. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal the guy on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Come here and stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger, deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely healed. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Next week, we're actually going to look at this passage again, because Jesus seems to go out of his way to break the laws, certain laws of Jewish custom and culture. And we're going to look at that a little more in depth next week, okay? But this week, we have this story where Jesus loses his temper. You have to imagine this. He comes in the back doors of church, and church was much like our church. They would have been sitting maybe together like this, and they would have been hanging out, and Jesus would have walked in the back doors, and he would have sensed a setup. So people are sitting around relaxed, organized. Church is so calm. It's the way it should be. And Jesus walks in right to the middle. And he says, he knows where the man with the shriveled hand is. He goes, "You, come here." And he looks at the crowd, and he asks the question. And in the middle of the room, he brings this man. The Greek there means right dead center. So everyone could see him, and it was super awkward. It was as awkward as I did it now. And what became more awkward was, as he stood in the middle of the church, and he asked the question, "What's better, good or evil?" And they didn't do anything, he started to get angry. And he probably glared at him like this and said, "What? Come on, what is it?" And he started to lose it a little bit. How awkward is that in church? Church, you're supposed to show up and be nice to everybody. You're supposed to keep the anger down for just an hour so that when you show up at church, you show up at synagogue, you are in control of yourself because you're here to worship in order. And Jesus walks in the middle and says, "I'm mad. I'm angry. And you're going to see me do it." It was probably super awkward. He probably showed up angry and everybody's like, "Ooh, I got to go. There's a football game on or something," right? There was no football then that I know of. And so there was this awkward moment where Jesus stands in the middle of upwards of maybe a church this size and says, "I'm mad." And he showed his anger in all its awkwardness and intensity right there in the middle of a room of people. And he heals the guy. He heals the guy. But what is he angry about here? He's angry because as he asks the question, they refuse to answer this question. This snaps him. He loses it. In their arrogance, they don't want to look wrong. They have God in front of them, the God of the universe. He is trying to teach them something. These men that proclaim to follow him and love him. And he's trying to help them see a deeper truth about the Sabbath. And they don't want to answer so they don't look stupid. God forbid they learn something from God. But they don't want to do that. They want to look smart, and they want to look right. And in their arrogance, they step back and say, "We're not answering you because it's a setup. And to answer you would make us look wrong, and we might actually learn something. To answer you would to take our illusions of this religion and would throw it out the window. And we'd see the reality of the religion, how you intended it, God, as opposed to the illusions we've created. Woe to you," says Jesus later. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, because you don't get to enter the kingdom of God, and you keep everybody else out too. Woe to you." He says in deep anger in Matthew 23. Woe to you. So the first instance of Jesus' anger is this deep arrogance by people of faith where they can't learn from God himself when he speaks. The deep arrogance that says, "I need to be right, and my illusions have to stay in place so I can be right." And when God, which he does for all of us, breaks those illusions, when we get right back into the illusions, it makes him angry. Jesus gets mad at Peter once. Do you remember this one? He then began in Mark 8:31. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, Jesus taught them this, and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him for it. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You don't have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." So I think it qualifies as anger when someone tells you, "Get behind me, Satan." Are we clear? We don't have to read too much in the text on that one, do we? Yes? You rarely say that out of kindness, do you? "Get behind me, please, Satan." No, you don't. You say it because you're angry and you snap. Okay? And Jesus, right there, kind of loses it. He says, oh, get behind me. What are you doing? He's trying to teach them something, and Peter does something very strange. What happened here? Jesus revisits his own temptation by the devil. The devil tempted Jesus with the illusion of who Jesus was supposed to be according to everyone else. Jesus was supposed to be the strong political leader who was going to take out Rome and save the people. He was going to be the greatest political leader ever, because that's what everybody believed the Messiah would be. And so when the devil said, make stones into bread, if you can feed everyone, they will love you. He said, jump off this temple and the angels will save you. Well, if you can do that and you can show miracles that big instead of just healing people here and there, then everyone will follow you. And the last temptation, he says, hey, I will give you the entire world if you kneel to me. Jesus snaps then too and rebukes the devil completely. Gets mad at him, says, get out of here. Yeah, I'm over this. What happens here? He says, I'm going to die one day, you guys. You need to be ready for that. Peter pulls him aside and says, don't say that. You know what the Messiah is supposed to be like. He is going to rule the world. Why are you saying things to freak people out? You're this Messiah, and that's who you're supposed to do. And what's just happened was Satan used Peter to dangle the illusion in front of Jesus one more time of who he was supposed to be. As Jesus saw his own suffering coming, Peter said, no, this is who you're supposed to be over here. He tempted him this way. By the way, all your temptations are linked to an illusion of who you'd like to be. A little side note. Anything you're tempted by, control, anger, gossip, lust, it's connected to an illusion of how you want yourself to be, how you project yourself to be. And Jesus saw that illusion coming. When he saw the temptation coming, he literally lost it. He got angry. He looked at the person who was tempting him and said, get behind me, Satan. We need to pepper this phrase into our language, I think, a little more often, don't we? Would that be a pretty fun day tomorrow? Someone tempts you with gossip. Hey, did you hear about Mary Sue and their marriage? And you just scream, get behind me, Satan! That'll stop gossip like that. Fixed that little problem in our church, didn't we? But could you imagine? What does Jesus get mad about? He gets mad because someone tempted him, and he loses it because somebody dared to tempt him with sin. Dared to tempt him with sin. Jesus gets mad at a third thing. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus enters the temple courts and begins driving out those in Mark 11 who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. You have made it a den of robbers. Jesus is super mad. John tells us he made a whip out of cords and just starts striking fools with whips. Right? Oh, get out of here. That's anger. That's like the Satan thing. Jesus is mad about something. Now, the outer court where he is called the court of the Gentiles. And as you get further up into the Temple Mount, the courts get smaller. This is the first one where everybody could be, including Gentiles. And Jesus has entered this space, and now he does this gesture. Now, this gesture is a symbolic, prophetic gesture. Jesus was not trying to completely shut down the economic systems of the temple. He only did it for maybe an hour or two. They probably set up as soon as he left. He stopped it for maybe an hour. It went on for another 70 years. What he's doing is a symbolic gesture like many of the prophets would do. They would act out dramas in front of people to get their heads to get what God was doing. Jeremiah buried his underwear once, dragged it back up and said, this is what you're like right here. Hosea married a prostitute and said, that's what it's like, how I feel about you people and me. They had symbolic gestures that represented what God was doing. This is what Jesus is doing. I believe, and there's much said about this passage, but I believe Jesus wasn't just protesting some guys trying to make side deals in the temple. He was protesting the entire temple system. Any system, religious, that restricts people's access to God is evil. The entire thing makes him mad. Now, and I think that because of what happens actually afterwards. Outside of the temple, he leaves. Before the temple story, he's cursed this fig tree, right? Because it didn't have any fruit on it. He goes, may you never bear fruit again. They walk into the temple scene. He walks back out. The disciples see the fig tree, and it's gone. It's wilted. It's nothing. And they say, well, what did you do that for? How'd you do that? It happened. He's like, yeah, check this out. You have faith. You can move this mountain and throw it into the sea. Now notice, all of you who have ever tried to pray for a mountain to be thrown in the sea, which we all have, haven't we? Just admit it. You've prayed once like, just show me, please, okay? We've all done this. He didn't say any mountain. He said this mountain. Where are they standing? They're standing outside the Temple Mount. He says this mountain will be thrown in the sea. What does he mean by that? The sea is destruction for the Jews. The sea is gone. The sea is an utter oblivion to be in the sea. He's going to take the Temple Mount and he will symbolically throw it into the ocean. It will be gone. In 70 years, the temple system will be gone and never be brought back even 2,000 years later. Jesus protests a system that restricts people's access to God, and in protesting it, it is wiped out. But his anger comes from watching all these people have to go through all these motions and other humans saying, you have to do this and this and this to get to God. And when he put people between Jesus and his people, he gets a little ticked. He gets a little mad. These things irritate him. So Jesus gets mad when people's faith makes them arrogant. Jesus gets mad when he is tempted. Jesus gets mad when religious organizations get in people's ways as they approach God. And he gets mad when they sell God to people. These, however, I had to realize, do not make me mad. I could make myself mad about them, but they do not arise any anger in me when I see them in the present times. At best, I'm fairly indifferent to these. When I'm tempted, I struggle with it, and I try and beat it, but it never makes me angry. I just kind of, I should beat this thing. It's kind of a big deal. I should try and be a better person or something. And that's where I deal with it. I don't get mad about it. I don't get mad about injustice in the system. First question I asked, what does Jesus get mad at? Second question I asked, what does Jesus not get mad at? What does Jesus not get mad at? Let's go through a little bit of a list here. Really never gets mad at sinful people. Never gets mad at sexual sin, which is interesting. The adulterers, the woman in John chapter 8, all these adulterers and people who struggle with sexual sin, as they come before him, he never responds in anger to these people. It doesn't make what they do is right. It simply means it doesn't make him angry. Annoying, suffering people do not make Jesus angry, yes? When people who have needs and they're constantly coming up to him, for most of us that would be rather annoying. You're like, I need a break. I need a lunch break. I need something. All day healing people, I get tired. Jesus doesn't. He doesn't get annoyed by people's needs in the situation. He heals them as needed. Jesus does not get annoyed by children, does he? He does not get angry at children. He does not drive them out of control. He does not lose. Here's a male thing, right? When men lose control of a situation, that's when our anger tends to flare. Like when our kids are going crazy or something, we feel like we've lost control. Jesus never loses it or gets angry when he's lost control. He stands before the temple court, and these men come up one after another and lie about him over and over. I would get mad at every one of those. He never gets mad at that. He never gets mad when people betray him. He never gets mad when people stab him in the back or when people hurt him. He doesn't get mad when he looks stupid like I do because he was naked on a cross and he didn't get mad, and you don't look any stupider than that. You don't. You look awful and beaten down, and he didn't get mad at that moment. He didn't get mad at the bad theology of the centurion in Matthew chapter 3. He doesn't get mad at this stuff. Now in this study I had to ask a third question. What does Jesus get mad at? What does he not get mad at? And what do I get mad at? I'm more like the second list than the first. I get mad when I lose control. I get mad when I get hurt. I get mad when I look stupid. I get mad when I feel stuck doing what God does, where Jesus never got mad about his duty. And sometimes I get mad at my kids. I look more like the second list. And so my desire was, these questions, I had to take a second look at Jesus and God's anger. So these list of questions made me realize that I am more in line with what Jesus did not get mad at than what he did. So what I wanted to look at, I took a second look at Jesus and God. I said, now, okay, what kind of anger do they have? Because clearly it's totally different than my anger. Okay? And it manifests itself completely different in God and Jesus than it does in me. It resides in a different place. Psalm 30 describes God's anger like this. Sing the praises of the Lord, you his faithful people. Praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. He says in Isaiah through the prophet, the Lord will call you back as if you were a wife, deserted and distressed in spirit. A wife who married young only to be rejected, says your God. For a brief moment I abandoned you, but with deep compassion I will bring you back. In a surge of anger I hid my face from you but for a moment. With everlasting kindness I will have compassion, says the Lord, the Redeemer. What do these passages say about God's anger? I think sometimes we think God's anger and his love live in tension with each other. And like one can rule the other, and it just matters which one on any given day. He's an angry God, and he's a loving God, and those live in some sort of a tension together. And he has to decide which one he's going to be that day. That is us creating God in our image, because that's us. We live in tension of love and anger every day. God does not. His love and anger are not equal parts of himself. These passages say very, very clearly. His anger lasts only a moment. The other one, a brief moment, while love lasts forever. What does this mean? God's anger is a surface emotion for him. It's his surface emotion. When things happen bad, his surface emotion is to snap a little bit. Oh, and he gets mad about things. C.S. Lewis says this. He says, anger for God is the fluid love bleeds. Anger is the fluid love bleeds when you cut it. For God, his love is who he is. Anger comes when he gets hurt. Anger comes on the surface, but below all that is this massive container of love. On the surface of that is just the little flashes in the pan of anger. God's anger does not live in tension with his love. It is a small part of him where the love is the biggest part of who he is. John Piper says this. He says, many of us believe God's love is like human love, where he feels like it and gives it to you and takes it back. He says, no, God's love is like the sun that shines to you. What does that mean about his anger? His anger is a solar flare. It flares and is gone. The sun and the warmth is who he is. The anger is a small part of his surface emotion. Now, Gnostics, as a little side note, these guys Gnostics, like 2,000 years ago, a guy named Marcion said this. And in present times, a guy named Harold Bloom says this. They're all Gnostics. They say Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, there's no way he's like Jesus, the God of the New Testament, because that old God was so angry and mean, and the new Jesus is so kind. Well, they miss it, don't they? Because Jesus is the exact same as Yahweh. Jesus' anger lives on his surface. He just gets a little angry here and there, and it's easy to erupt because it's on his surface. It's not like your and my anger, which is deep. It's on the surface of himself. Deep inside Jesus is love and joy. The deepest part of Jesus is love and joy. The surface is anger. So he would react to things, maybe things you and I wouldn't, because the surface emotion for him is anger. And he deals with things sometimes in anger because it's okay to be angry as long as you don't sin. And he would flash here and flash there, and he would deal with moments where he was angry at his disciples for keeping kids away and the Pharisees. And he would deal with little anger, and it would be gone. Because deep below him was joy. What he shoved down was joy and love. And that's what the core of his being was. Because Jesus, like God, had a core of love and joy that did not live in tension with anger. Anger was surface. Love and joy were the deep. It was what they were. As opposed to us. For us, love and joy are surface emotions. And deep is anger. The deep thing for us is anger and hurt and betrayal because we shoved it and shoved it and shoved it. And on the surface, we're like, we love everybody. Everybody's so nice. And we go to church and we shake hands. And then deep below is this, you take out on the dog, right? Or I take out on the dog. This is what we have as people. This is who we are. We have the anger and bitter deep, and we have the surface emotions of love. Jesus, the love and joy were deep, and the surface was anger, literally opposites. Now, Jesus for us would have probably been a pretty awkward guy to be around, because if anger's on the surface, it comes up at times you would not expect it. And you're like, no, you're supposed to shove that down and pretend to be a polite person, like a good Swede should be. Shove that down, keep it inside, right? Deadpan face. Jesus didn't do that, he lost it. What are you doing? His disciples, he lost it all the time. Am I really still here? Do I really have to teach this again? Really? Really? And he would do that. But he never sinned. But he kind of got mad sometimes. And it was okay. Because his anger was on the surface and his joy was deep. Our anger is deep. When God wanted to describe his own anger in the Greek words, he used the word ogre. And ogre literally means in anger, that short little surfacey kind of, I'm mad and I'm over it. I'm mad and I'm over it. It's just a normal thing. When he wanted to describe our anger, he called it tumia. Tumia is a deep anger. It is the deep anger that erupts at unwanted times. It is a deep core of anger and bitterness and hurt. And he said, that's what you're more like. When he said in Galatians, he opposed the fruit of the flesh, the fruit of the spirit, he said anger and wrath. Tumia is what he said. Tumia, you are a deep anger. My anger is a flash on top. Yours is a deep anger that is utterly terrifying. Our deep welling up is something we should be afraid of. Absolutely. You should be terrified of it. Because that deep core of who you are, all the stuff we've stuffed down there, is creating something that you cannot control. Period. You should not be proud of it, that you can stand up for yourself every once in a while. You should not be indifferent to it. You should be terrified of it. It requires God doing major surgery on us to begin to reverse that like he is. To put the joy and love deep and the anger on the surface. Which, and by the way, only God can change your heart. This is the story of this. I have no self-help. I don't have 20 things for you to do this week that are going to help you. I have 4 things that might help, but they don't involve punching pillows, punching bags, punching your dog, none of that, okay? I don't have any self-help things. Go buy a book. Maybe that will help. I am a pastor, and all I know about is how to live with God and what I've tried and what I haven't. So we have this space where we are going to start to confront some of the anger in our lives. When anger comes up this week, which it will because I'm going to pray for it, I'm going to pray it does, stop right where you are and ask God what's going on. This is a huge part of our spiritual lives. You are so busy sprinting. Stop. Be late for the appointment. Okay, be late. Who cares? Be late. This is a big deal. This is your inner life. This is the core of anger. And when it pops up and bursts, go, okay, what was that? What was that? Where is that coming from, God? Start to have a conversation with God. And if it's really deep tumia, if it's really deep anger, you need to take a walk and get away from people. Because anger is a high energy emotion. You may need to burn a little bit. I take walks, I pull weeds. That's what I do as I process with God. So as I get really angry, if you see me in my front yard, like, and I'm pulling weeds, that's me angry. That's how I deal with it. I go out and I pray to God and I pull weeds. And thank God he keeps putting them in my lawn. That I have more to deal with, apparently. When I have no weeds, I clearly will have no anger left, right? Take a moment, as the anger pops up this week, that little moment, wherever it is, at the red light, at whatever happens to you, and it goes, oh, you lose it a little bit, go, hey, what was that? Lord, what just happened to me? And I want you to talk to him about that. First thing I want you to do is invite him into that space, that deep space where your anger is. Ask him the question, Lord, what's going on in my deepest self? There's some anger down here deep somewhere, and I don't know what's happening, and it comes up at very strange times. Will you help me, please? It is a sin. I confess it to you that this anger is a sin. I agree with you it's a sin. I need your help. This is the first thing we do together is to throw ourselves on God's mercy and grace together because the anger in us is greater than we can handle. The second thing we do is ask him to begin to let go of this anger and to get angry like he does. So this week, as my anger pops up, I'm going to go, okay, Lord, what is happening here? I confess it's sin. I ask you to make me angry like Jesus and switch him. Make me angry about the things that he's angry about. Help me to stop being angry about the stuff that he's not. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to practice patience. Now, the word patience in the Greek is macrotumia. Remember tumia? Tumia, the deep welling of anger. Patience was controlling the deep welling of anger. Macrotumia. The words go hand in hand with each other. Love, joy, peace, patience are the fruit of the Spirit. Patience is the control of anger. Now, N.T. Wright suggests this little thing, that we need to develop second natures, and when we develop second natures with the grace of God, it changes the deepest parts of who we are. It's called virtue in the oldest texts of our religion. That if you do something, he suggests if you do something 1,000 times in a small way, it becomes second nature on the 1,001st time when you really, really need it to be. Okay? So if you are a red light and you ask for patience because you lost the red light and you're late for your appointment and you're feeling lose it, you're like, Lord, I need your help right now. The anger's coming. I need your help me. Okay? When the DMV line or your number keeps popping up and all those people keep going, but your number, you swear you were there before them at the DMV. You swear you were. And it just keeps going and going and you feel the anger. You take a moment to go, Lord, I need your help right now. When the kids scream for some reason that are around you, they just scream randomly. You're like, my eardrum burst on this side. It's gone. I can't hear anymore. When that happens, you say, Lord, help me control this anger popping up. When these things happen, the little things happen, the little anger moments, we can practice patience. Because on the 1,001st time, when your best friend stabs you in the back, you have patience, and the anger does not rule like it would if you didn't. God has built a system where we practice the little things in the little moments, and then when the big ones come, We can beat them. And what does it mean when we beat the big ones? It means through that 1,000 times you made little decisions with the power of his grace and inviting them into the situations, the 1,000 times you made that little choice, it means he's slowly changing the deepest part of your heart. He's invading, he's changing you, he's moving in you. Your part is obedience to patience. His part is to do the surgery. And you're working as a team, as you always should. Work out your salvation with fear and with trembling. Work out your salvation with fear and with trembling. You're not doing this alone. You're not doing this to impress him. You're doing this to get in the dark parts of yourself and allow him to clean them out through the power of his Holy Spirit. Jesus showed us that true anger is alive and it lives in us. And join me, let's join each other, join him in rooting that anger out of ourselves. We have thrown ourselves into the hands of an angry God, and thank goodness he's not like us, that anger is a flash, and that the love is what's underneath. Thank God. May you get angry this week. May you have a moment where you feel like you're losing it. And may you be reminded by the Lord of the universe, our living Savior, Jesus Christ, to stop and have a conversation about that anger. May you practice patience in little moments as you invite God into those moments, so that on the 1,001st time, when it matters, he has changed you completely. Thank you, Crossroads Church, for being with us this morning. Go in peace. We will see you next week.